Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Grafton Select Board meeting for February 2nd, 2021. I'll open the meeting up at 7:28 p.m. As a preliminary matter, my name is Peter, and I will be the chair of the Town of Grafton Select Board meeting. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on this agenda are present and can hear me. Select Board members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Ms. DeFazio? Not here yet. Mr. Rofton?
Sure, I don't care.
Not here yet. Mr. Frisbee?
Here.
Ms. Roy?
Roy here.
Mr. Carlson. Thank you. Staff, when I please call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Temporary Town Administrator Carter Terenzini.
Present.
Chief Michael Gauthier, Grafton Fire Department.
Go ahead.
Present.
All right, and those anticipated speakers on the agenda tonight, please respond in the affirmative. Michael Colleen.
Present.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. This open meeting of the Town of Grafton Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the Governor's order suspends the requirement of open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted on the town's website at www.grafton-ma.gov, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature a public comment for any public hearing at this time. For this meeting, the Select Board is convened via Zoom and is posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Please be aware that others may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording and viewed by the public. All supporting materials have been provided to members of this body, are available on the town's website, and when final minutes are posted, unless otherwise noted by myself. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless either chair will note otherwise. Just for some basic ground rules, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until I yield the floor to you, and please raise your hand to do so. And finally, that any vote taken tonight in this meeting will be conducted by roll call. Real quick, I have a few announcements I just want to read first before we get into the first part of our agenda. So just to let you remind everyone that the Grafton Municipal Center remains closed to the general public due to the town's designation as a red or high-risk community. Shortly after the red designation is lifted, the Municipal Center will return to appointment scheduling for business. Customer business services will be done remotely during this time. Please continue to access COVID-related information and updates on the town's website. From the TA's office, Select Board is happy to share with you that we have voted and ratified a contract with Evan Broussard last week, and 2 weeks ago, and his first official start date will be Monday, February 22nd. Over the next few weeks, we will be working diligently with Carter and Evan on the transition. Just an update, please, that the temporary town administrator will be presenting the FY22 budget to the Select Board and Finance Committee on February 10th. We have been following this approach, a joint presentation of both groups for several years now. This meeting will be held via Zoom with the link posted on the agendas on the town webpage. Do we have any public comments from the public this evening? I'm not seeing anybody come in. Okay. All right. So first up on our agenda tonight, I would like to take out of order, with the permission of the committee, we have Fire Prevention Officer Michael Colleen. Michael, good evening, and Chief Gauthier here to present us with an appointment.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. If I might, as you know, this is initially titled Fire Inspector. It's been renamed Fire Prevention Officer to reflect best management practice and also the creation of education programs. for the school and others. Chief Gauthier participated in many of the interviews. He was not able to participate in the final one due to being on vacation, but he did designate Mr. Cheris to sit in. So the final interviews were conducted by myself, Mr. Berger, and Mr. Cheris. And I'm pleased to present to you tonight and would welcome the comments of Chief Gauthier. Michael Colleen, who I think is well qualified to step in and take this task over and perform well, and then we can move on to other elements in the program. Chief, did you want to weigh in?
Yes, I just want to welcome Mike Colleen. You come highly recommended. You have quite the credentials, and looking forward to working with you in the near future.
Good evening, Mike. Thanks for coming in tonight. You want to just kind of give a little bit about yourself? Tell us about yourself, where have you worked before?
Sure. Thank you all very much for having me, and I look forward to working for the town of Grafton. Thank you, Chief Gauthier. So I come from the town of Northbridge. I worked as a call firefighter in 2010. Been a full-time firefighter over there for 4 years. I worked at one other department 2 years full-time before then. Basic story of me is I have my bachelor's degree from Anna Maria College. I'm currently in school for my master's of public administration at Anna Maria. I went to the Mass Fire Academy and got my fire prevention officer basic 1 and 2. And I'm just a person who continues to learn, very eager to take as many classes from both the Mass Fire Academy, National Fire Academy, and the Fire Prevention Association of Massachusetts. So I just look forward to working for the town and its residents, and to learn and push forward every single day.
Thank you very much, Mike, for that intro. I know I speak on behalf of everyone here. Welcome to Grafton. We're really pleased and excited to have you on board in the team. It's great to hear the recommendations from Chief Gauthier and from Mr. Terenzini tonight. Does anyone from the board have any questions for Mr. Colleen? Well, I think you're getting off easy tonight. All right. Well, on that notion, I can entertain a motion.
I think Mr. Opton had a question.
I'm sorry. So often, did you have your hand up? I'm sorry, man.
I just wanted to say a hearty Yahoo for getting you on board. It's been quite some time. This position's been advertised for quite some time. So I'm really excited. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
I might also add too that this is Chief. This is only the second full-time personnel FTE, right, for the fire department ever in its history.
Yes, that's correct. Steve Charis was the full-time inspector previous to his retirement, and he did agree to stay on part-time until we could get a full-time fire prevention officer, and we finally have one, and looking forward to working with Mike. Sorry, I don't have my picture up on the screen. I got a little computer problems with it, so but I can hear everybody. I can see everybody. But
Sorry, Chief. We all know
looking forward to working with Mike, getting and moving on.
We all know what you look like, Chief. You're good. You're safe with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mrs.
Best beard in Grafton.
I just want to comment too and say welcome, and that I'm currently getting texts from Northbridge saying that you are going to be very good for Grafton. So welcome aboard.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Frisbee.
Yeah, just one thing. As Matt had noted, and I'm saying this for the benefit of the people who have tuned in here, we have sort of a larger than usual attendees list, and I think it's for another reason. But while we have people here and you're a captive audience, I do want to point out, typically speaking, when you have these positions open for a while, it's because there's so much demand for these positions out there and so few applicants. And one of the things that happens is, as with any employer, you enter into discussions about compensation, and 80% of our budget is compensation. So, when people look around and they consider their tax bill, I do want them to consider that we're providing a service here. We're not just charging for things. And one of the services that we provide is fire protection, and public safety. And it's an important one, and it's not getting any cheaper as the years go on. The staff is expanding. I think we've taken action and steps to help improve the department for years to come here. And Mike's hire is just one of those steps along the way. So I hope that people do continue to pay attention to this and understand that as the town grows, the provision of services that we have grow accordingly.
Well said. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, well, welcome aboard again, Mike. At this time, I can entertain a motion from the board.
I move the board vote to approve the confirmation of the appointment of Michael Colleen to the position of Fire Prevention Officer.
Second,
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio,
Fazio, I.
Mr. Hoffman,
Upton, aye.
Mr. Frisbee,
Yeah,
Ms. Roy?
Roy, I.
Peter Carlson, I declare the motion carried unanimous. Welcome, Mike. Thank you very much. When's your first day?
Thank you very much. February 16th.
Well, great. Fantastic. And I just want to also extend a huge thanks to Steve Charis for all his years of work, and we appreciate him. I believe Jimmy Barker and Rick Elaine for stepping in to making sure that our town has received its inspections. And Chief, I am really looking forward to this. I just want to say again, thank you to you and your staff for stepping up and filling in and doing an excellent job.
Thank you, Peter. And there will be a transition period going on because there is a lot going on in the town of Grafton. And Steve will work with Mike and get him caught up and up to speed on everything. And this could take, a month or two or even a little bit longer. But Steve's agreed to stay on as long as he feels comfortable. Mike's ready to do it by himself because there is a lot going on in Grafton. And Mike will be working a lot.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much, guys, for coming in. Have a great night.
Thank
Thank
you.
All right. Thank you for that, for taking that out of order. We're going to move back to schedule action item here, sale of 127 Westboro Road. So, Mr. Terenzini, you want to just update the board?
Certainly, there is no formal policy that we found, and I would encourage you to draft one at some point. But the process that I always follow is to, when we get a request like this, to send it to the assessors, to also send it to all departments to see if there are any abutting town properties or if there is a perceived public policy use for retaining it. In this case, the advice of the assessor was that there were no abutting town properties, and the advice of the department heads was that they saw no public purpose in retaining it. Under the statute, any property under 35,000 does not have to be advertised, but it does have to be valued. So you have the valuation memorandum from the principal assessor, and town council did agree that given the limited value of the property, that a in-house valuation would be considered appropriate, and that it would not be required that we engage a third-party independent assessor given the nominal value of the property. This would require action by the annual town meeting to authorize the disposal if they so agree. So now the question becomes what you wish to indicate to the property owner and whether or not you wish to proceed to seek the approval of town meeting of your authority to sell the property.
Mr. Terenzini, would it help if I screen share the GIS just so the board wants to see this tonight?
By all means, Mr. Chairman.
So this is 127 highlighted in green here, 127 Old Westboro Road. This is the parcel question.
It is.
All right, board have any questions?
In parcel one, just to be clear, Mr. Chairman, is the one that wishes to acquire it.
This one here. Yep.
Yes, sir.
Okay, any questions? All right, I can stop share my screen. I can entertain a motion.
I move the board place the sale of 127 Old Westball Road onto the May 2021 annual town meeting warrant.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on adding Mr. Frisbee?
Yeah, just briefly, Peter, this is something that we did that was very similar to something that happened, I believe it was on Blanchard Road, maybe 2.5 years ago, where there were little slivers of land that are out there that adjoin a private parcel that for whatever reason the town owns. I agree with Carter, and in keeping with the discussion we had recently about policies, it would be helpful if we wrote this down, but this is consistent with what we've done in other instances where the land value is just so little, and it would mean more to the adjoining property owner if we were to convey it over.
Okay, great. Any other questions on the motion? Comments? All right, hearing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio,
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Austin,
Often I.
Mr. Frisbee,
Aye.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, I.
Peter Carlson, aye. Okay, declare the motion carried. Thank you. They'll be added to the Springtown meeting. So next up here, we have MSW contracts, charges and practices. Carter, do you want to give us?
So several months ago in workshop, we presented to you the several contracts that you have with respect to municipal solid waste, which ones you were at risk for, and the fact that the collection of refuse and recyclables expires on June 30, 2021. We further provided you with information of a major cost factor that you would experience in that up until this contract, recyclables, or what we generally refer to as commodities or interchangeably refer to as commodities, have basically from being a net positive to a net negative. In general, up until about a couple years ago, if the processor didn't make money on recyclables, they were at least covering the costs of processing them and handling them and collecting them. However, with the change in what China would accept, with the change in many other overseas markets, that has simply gone upside down, and it is now costing $80 to $90 to actually process and dispose of recyclables. So we laid out for you the impact of that. We provided you with a further basis of that calculation a bit earlier today. And this one item alone is about $175,000, give or take, depending upon where that final processing fee lands. Obviously, if it's 80, it's less than if it's 90, and how many tons of recyclables you end up processing. If it drops into the lower values that you were able to see on the one chart, obviously it's less. So this is one element of your solid waste budget going forward into next year. And one of the things that we've recommended a couple of different options. One option is to try to negotiate with others to see if you can get a better contract. Frankly, I'm not sure that would hold up. The market is consolidated to the point where you really only have three major players at this point: Harvey, Casella, and WMI, Waste Management Incorporated. The second option is to negotiate with Harvey in terms of the cap that they would put on that per ton, and perhaps even a cap with respect to how many tons of recyclables. For those, we did put in the memorandum sections of the statute that show you that the collection and disposal of waste and recyclables is exempt from the procurement statute, Mass General Law, Chapter 30B. So a single negotiation with a single provider is perfectly legal and not at all uncommon. The third option was to raise the pricing of the pay-as-you-throw program. we suggested 40%, roughly 40% on one, and I think 50% on the other. And the fourth option was to go out of the business. Now, we were asked to take a step back, look at alternative recycling, composting, some other things, and we've provided you some information at the last workshop. And while there is possibly some fruitful areas of work there, I don't think that anything could be put together in time with a meaningful impact that's going to change the fiscal 22 outlook. So we really need a sense of direction, because if you are going to raise the pay-as-you-throw fees, we will calculate that into the income and then build the budget to that. The budget has to come to you balanced. X amount of income, Y amount of expense, no surplus, no deficit. If you are not interested in increasing the fees, then we will still present a balanced budget. But we need a sense of direction coming out of this meeting tonight. Now that's not to say that if you don't raise the fees tonight, when you see what had to be cut within the budget to balance it, you may come to a different decision. But in any event, however you think you might proceed, we really do need that sense of direction tonight, Mr. Chairman, because I owe you a document in 7 days. And I have a little bit of work to do based upon whatever decisions y'all make.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, Mr. Terentini. Any questions from the board? Mr. Frisbee?
Yeah, so what's the services delta? What are we looking at losing potentially in terms of value in the budget if we don't raise fees, but we just want to absorb the costs in the budget?
I think that, we showed you that that sanitation budget is going to go up around 230, 250,000. Some of that I think can be absorbed. I'm going to stand at the 175 plus or minus that we've been projecting from the beginning. What we didn't realize until the last few days is that the FY21 budget had been dropped considerably below the FY20 budget. You expended about 260,000 in FY20. You appropriated roughly 226, I think, for FY21. And for FY22, I'm projecting on the basis of tonnage, we're going to have to go back up that $30,000 or so. But I'm going to stand at that 175 plus or minus, Mr. Frisbee.
All right, Mr. Hoffman?
Yeah, I'm wondering what our comparables are for bag fees relative to other towns. If we were to raise up the 40, 50%, small, large, where would we be?
I don't have that in front of me. It is, I don't know if it's in your packet. We did do a study of the communities, the 13 or so communities. Bear in mind that I think only 6 of them provide curbside collection. So you'd have to compare that against some transfer station as well. My recollection is we found that at our recommended rates, you'd be in the median, that right now you are the lowest charging, and that our recommended rates, you'd be in the median range. Now that's not a broad sample. There's only 13 communities in the sample, and then there's several of them that don't provide any service whatsoever. They don't provide curbside, they don't provide transfer station. The challenge here is always, if I might, and I've seen communities do this for many years I've watched. Everybody can see that the cost is tracking up, but nobody wants to increase the charge. And so when you finally, the real sticker shock here is the commodities this year. But when you finally have to deal with it, there's often a great sticker shock because 5% or 10% won't close the gap, won't do it. And so I think that is something to keep in mind going forward for any revenue-based service.
All right, and second question, how much, if we were to implement composting, could we potentially claw back once that were to be implemented? I know this is a tough ask without doing a deep analysis, but any sense of that?
I honestly don't, because there are costs involved in that. In many ways, it's a value added that you provide the homeowner. I know that Ms. DeFazio, I don't recall if you, I think shortly before I got there, Ms. DeFazio suggested you may already have taken a vote on a recycling committee. I think this is something that really needs, we talk about people on a mission from God. In this case, I'm going to call it being on a mission from Mother Nature. I think you need folks who really can do the deep dive on that for you, Mr. Opton. We did not have an opportunity to do that. And I don't think you could implement any of these things, frankly, in time to have a meaningful impact on the 22 budget.
Right. Thanks.
Any other questions, Mr. Fazio?
Yeah, not questions, but more comments and discussion, Mr. Chair. Thank you. So based on these options that we have, in my opinion, I think we should negotiate with Harvey. We've had a long-term relationship with them, and I had mentioned to Carter today that we were their first curbside municipal contract, and so we have a long-standing healthy relationship with them, and I'm optimistic about staying with them as far as negotiations and not going out to Waste Management or Casella. And maybe another board member can remind me, we put together a policy that I had brought before the board that had to do with starting a committee for exactly this, which is kind of look at our waste management policy. And then, of course, we got sidetracked with a million other things this summer. It was probably around June, and we didn't have anyone step up to the position. And the purpose of it, if we were to revisit that, is to form a small committee, short time, to help first and foremost get public input, which I think is important because trash is very, very personal to people, and for education and outreach. And so things such as composting and asking people what their particular individual needs are for a household is very effective. And I'm also in favor of upgrading the bags. However, I would want to see, even with that vote tonight, I would want to see in the budget what other services could potentially be cut. And so that way, to Mr. Opton's point, if we are in a high range of bag fees, can we do a little bit of both? And I know that we don't really have places to cut anywhere, and this is a lousy situation, but I think getting rid of our trash plan is the wrong decision. And so, I think to see the full picture of what those cuts would be would also be helpful for the board to move forward with this decision as we negotiate with Harvey.
All right, any other questions or comments from the board? Mr. Opton?
Yeah, I guess I would agree with the strategy of moving forward with negotiating with Harvey. I do think they've been a good partner, and given the time frame that we're in, that type of negotiation strategy makes more sense to me than going out to bid. I think if we were to go, out to market, that would be a challenge for us to make that all happen before, and actually make the transition before we were to move forward with another contract. So I'd personally be in favor of moving forward with Harvey, seeing what we can do with them, and then potentially once we have gotten through that negotiation, at that point I would be more interested in discussing increasing bag fees.
All right, any other questions or comments from the board? Mr. Fazio?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Carter, but you need us to make a decision on those bag fees tonight. Is that what you are requesting?
Well, we've given you a variety of motions, so I would suggest that there's one that I missed, which was to a three-part motion, perhaps, I would respectfully suggest, would be to direct the staff, and I think it would be terrific if we had one or two board members in particular. Ms. DeFazio, I think the expression from my military friends is voluntold, because she has such a lengthy history with Harvey. I think having someone from the board, but especially her, involved in negotiations would be very helpful. So that would clarify who the provider would be. The second part of the motion would be to not increase bag fees at this point in time. That would allow you to see what cuts had been made in the budget. And perhaps you found, a cut in the police department particularly offensive, or a cut in the proposed library budget. You can say, well, I want to put $50,000 back there. What does that make the bag fee? And then you find 35,000 in recreation you want to put in. You say, okay, so you can kind of walk through that cumulatively, restoring services. And then the third part would be to direct the staff to craft a charge and composition. And it sounds like there may already have been something floating around back in June or July for a 7-member waste reduction and recycling committee. That would cover all three elements, and it essentially says, okay, Carter, you got to eat it in the budget, and you're doing these other things. That would give me the sense of direction that I need.
Mr. Fazio?
Well, I would happily step up to retake my nickname as Bag Lady in this town, and work with Harvey and Evan and perhaps another board member if anyone wants to join me. But I would be happy to do that. But also to Carter's point, I think citizen input is important as well. And working on even a 5-person committee, if we bring it down to 5, and outreach and education. And as we know, we all have a lot on our plates, but also they wouldn't be representing the same way we do. We appoint them to really go out to the community and see, what people are feeling and provide input to us. So I think both those things would be enormously helpful in this decision.
All right. Okay, any questions, additional comments on that, Ms. Roy?
So are we making an additional committee for Ms. DeFazio subcommittee to work on, or is this just to take up the one that was voted on last summer?
My understanding, it's the same one. I think we just have to make a little push to see if people are willing to step up and help, seeing that we're 5 months away from this contract ending.
Okay, but just for motion purposes, we don't need an additional motion because the board's already taken action, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then as far as the motion for tonight, it is written in multiple ways. So we definitely want to continue negotiations with Harvey, and we want to see what the budget looks like absorbing the cost, correct? That's what everybody would like to see. All right.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yeah, I guess I'd just like to emphasize maybe that we signal to Harvey that there are partners in this, and we're looking to negotiate with them, exclusively. We want to move forward. We've been happy with the service, broadly, and we're looking to try to continue this relationship. So I don't know if we need a motion particular for that, but I think it's important for us to signal to them that, that they're the partner that we want, and we want to continue with the relationship.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right, Mr. Terenzini.
Just one clarifying thing. In the documents we gave you, we showed you 3 contracts, 2 with Harvey. Frankly, no one really, including Harvey, understands exactly what the second one is. So those will be melded into one to be interpreted under Massachusetts statute. And so at the end of the day, you'll have 2 contracts, not the 3 that you have now.
Would you say that one more time, Mr. Terenzini?
There were 3 contracts that we presented to you in our original memorandum. The first one was for curbside collection and recycling. The second one appeared to be simply a transport to Wheelabrator. The third contract was with Wheelabrator. The first 2 contracts with Harvey will eventually be merged into one to be interpreted under Massachusetts statute. And so at the end, you'll have 2 contracts, not 3. And I just wanted to give people the heads up on that in case there was any confusion.
Okay, thank you. All right, I remember that now. Okay, any other questions or comments from the board? All right, what does the board wish to do then? I'll entertain a motion or an idea of a motion, and we can draft the language and decide.
Well, I'll start with this motion and then we can rip it apart if that's good. I move the board vote to authorize the town administrator to commence negotiations with E.L. Harvey and Sons for a 3-year pact for the curbside collection of refuse and recyclables with a cancellation clause for non-appropriation each year, and to absorb the cost of the increase within the operating budget. And further, to direct staff to prepare a charge and composition to the reestablishment of the Waste Reduction and Recycling Committee to consist of 7 members.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion?
Do we want to make that a smaller committee or a 7? Good. I guess I'm directing that towards Doreen a lot. I don't know.
Mr. Chair, if I may, yeah, I think we keep it at 7 to keep it simple. And, you know, if we get 5, that's great. I think a 7-member committee is good in case people can't make it. And so there's a quorum, but we may not get 7, but keeping it at that, in my opinion, would be fine.
All right, any other further discussion on the motion? So there's no changes. It's keeping at 7. If there isn't any further discussion on the motion, we'll go by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio,
DeFazio, aye.
Mr. Often,
Often aye.
Mr. Prisby,
Yeah.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, aye.
Peter Carlson, aye. Declare the motion carried. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Carter, you have that all set. All right, next up here, an action item here for us to review and amend the FY22 revenue projections. Mr. Terenzini, did you want to go over that?
Yes, 2 changes to the revenue projections that the board has previously authorized. The first is an additional draw of roughly $300,000 out of the available remainder of the override. That additional draw comes out of the committee of 21 January to close the gap in the school budget. The second change is I had predicted that state aid would not go down. In fact, it went up about 3% overall. This budget revenue includes that. So the board has a couple of options here. It could approve both the additional draw from the override as appeared to be the consensus on 21 January and the additional state aid, which provides relief on the general fund side of the house. Or we could just take in the general fund revenues from House 1 and retain the override at 575. At which point the general fund would go back to having about $740,000 to work with. Given the vote that has just been made on the pay-as-you-throw program, I believe that provides more strength for the argument of using the projections in front of you, which would give the general fund about $1,050,000 overall to meet all of its obligations on its side of the house, and give the school district And let me say that when we got the final house number, and I think I jokingly said, "Oh yeah, I should have bought a lottery ticket the day I made my prediction on the on local aid." I did sit down with Superintendent Cummings to share this news with him, and he felt that he was comfortable with the budget that he had, and that was workable, because I wanted to make sure that he was good, and both he and Ms. Patel thought that the number they presented on 21 January was good, and that we could retain the additional House One monies on the town side of the budget. The balance of the estimates have not changed from what you approved previously.
Okay. Any questions, comments from Mr. Terenzini before we entertain a motion?
May I just say something, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
I know that I think it was Mr. Prisby who has initially expressed some concern when we divided it up 60-40, and I suggested that we needed to have some targets to work towards. I do think that while it didn't end up 60-40 in the end, I think that the process itself of setting revenue numbers for each side of the house and having each side of the house go through that process of trying to work with those numbers, and then when they couldn't, the TRICOM getting together and having that discussion that resulted in the consensus to make an additional draw out of the override surplus. I do think that the process worked and provided a clear path forward.
Mr. Prisby?
Yeah, I concur. I think the process was good. You know, one of the problems that we had in years past was the deliberations often got contentious, so the starting point became sometimes the end point. So, you know, not being used to a more collaborative process, that I think that was a genesis of my concern initially, but certainly, you know, watching you walk through it and working closely with the school department to get to a place where everybody, I think, was on the same page and is on the same page so far, I think has been good. You know, certainly we've got to see our budget and go through that, but yeah, I think so far I like where we're at in our approach.
All right. Any other questions or comments? All right, so we have some options here tonight. Any opinion on where the board feels, what it wants to do with projections tonight? Not seeing anybody. Okay, I think at this point, we can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to approve the revised FY22 revenue projections and the allocations of anticipated increased revenues, $1.4 million to the school department and $1.05 million to the general fund as expense budgetary guidance dated January 28th, 2021, as submitted.
Do I have a second on that motion?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussions on the motions on the revenue projections? All right, seeing none. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Often?
Often aye.
Mr. Prisby? Ms. Roy?
Roy, aye.
Peter Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Okay, so next up here tonight on our item is follow up and getting some conclusion here with regards to policy for recreational cannabis facilities here in Grafton. I know we've had this in front of us for a while. We've made some changes. I wanted to open it up discussion from the board tonight, how it felt moving forward, and then if I feel we're ready, we can take a motion or table this. Anyone would like to go first? Mr. Prisby.
So we've had discussions in a different context, but just for the benefit of the people who are watching this at home and people who might be watching in the future, As you recall, there was a ballot initiative a few years back to legalize the sale of recreational marijuana. And, you know, that's, I think, what the public sees on the surface, and they see stores opening and people may or may not, you know, partake in the stores. People might just be interested in the revenue. I don't know. But I think what I want people to know is behind the scenes, as with any initiative that is the product of a ballot initiative, the process is just a mess. I mean, you know, it's basically like, do you want this thing that's popular? Okay, yes. Okay, well, then I'm going to vote yes, and everybody else can figure out the details. Well, the details have been really messy. And we've had to figure out how many stores we're going to allow in town, where are we going to allow them, and then deal with the state's law about how these things go about getting opened. And it involves a multi-step process. Some steps take place here within the community, other steps take place at the state level. And as one might imagine, there's not a lot of direction for communities in trying to figure out how we're all going to make this happen in a way that makes everybody happy, in particular the people who are investing in opening up these places. Our process was 2 years ago when we started this to entertain applications for a host community agreement. And the host community agreement would allow us to negotiate with the purveyor of recreational marijuana sales some form of a cut, for lack of a better term. We would take a percentage of their proceeds. They would give us back fees, and we would then be happy. That was our mandate. We would negotiate that, and we negotiated the same deal with everybody that came before us. The question was going to become, how many of these HCAs are we giving out? You know, are we doing multiple? We have a limit of 2 facilities we can open in town. You know, when do we stop giving out HCAs? Is it when there are 2 open? What's the process? Well, we don't know. We have to figure that out based on the very, very limited input that we have from the state and from our legal team. So now we have given out 3 HCAs and we only have spot for 2. So much like a game of musical chairs, someone's going to be left standing in the end, and whoever's left standing in the end isn't going to be too happy about it. So we've put our heads together on a policy to deal with how we're going to handle incoming HCAs and how we're going to deal with our applicants going forward. And I think it's necessary because in fairness to all the applicants, they need to know what our philosophy is. And our philosophy is you've got to do your best to get your final license from the CCC, and you've got to open as soon as humanly possible. Because this revenue has been calculated into our budget, into projections for a couple of years now. And as people who have paid attention closely know, we haven't got a dime of it yet. And that's a problem for us. So in order to push this thing forward, I think it's good that not only are these board members on the same page as our town administration, but our future board members are on the same page as these board members, and future applicants are on the same page as present applicants. And everybody knows what our philosophy is going forward so that there's no more confusion about what our expectations are. And now I think if we pass this, we can safely say that our expectation is that we will entertain applicants for HCAs, and we will stop entertaining them once we have customers moving through 2 stores. And that way we are incentivizing people opening as soon as possible. And we are getting to a place where we can have revenue coming into our coffers at the earliest possible time. We have in the past, I think kind of casually, entertained presentations from people and have said, welcome aboard, go through the process. And I think that this policy probably would have been better 2 years ago, but I think it's important to do now so that everybody is on the same page with where we are. I'm in full support. I wish we could have done it better 2 years ago, but here we are now. I think it's important that we vote tonight and that we get this on the books so that we can move forward and get one of these shops open.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments before tonight? Mr. Fazio?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, yeah, I mean, this is a really difficult discussion, and it seems like there is no good solution to this. And I have a little bit of a different approach than Mr. Prisby and the rest of the board. And, you know, I'm fine with voting tonight and moving ahead with the majority. But I'm struggling a bit. So, you know, obviously I want the revenue for our town. And I agree in the fact that the process is an absolute mess and we don't really have any guidance from the state. I'm really concerned about the liability in the litigation. And, you know, there's a couple different ways to look at it. And Mr. Prisby had, you know, one approach. And the other thing is I'm concerned about our reputation of partnering with businesses in town. And I think that's, you know, that's something that I'm also taking into consideration. So although I am in favor of a policy, the policy that I've looked at tonight, I keep going back to the fact that it's like, we don't have a plan. You know, we have a policy, we don't have an updated bylaw, but we don't have any sort of enforcement mechanism in place. And so, you know, my gut is telling me to vote nay tonight, and that's probably very different than the rest of the board here. But that's where I'm at. It's just, and I'm still struggling of, you know, what is the best approach? How do we get out of this mess? And the best thing I can do is tell council, you know, come up with a really solid enforcement mechanism so that we don't go into litigation and, you know, we're able to receive the revenue of the town. And we don't have to worry about our reputation partnering with businesses, whether it's 2 or 3, but I'm just not comfortable at the approach where it is tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Fazio. Ms. Roy, did you have a question, comment?
I do have a question. So I hear what Mr. Fazio is saying about a different approach, and I agree that we do need an enforcement mechanism in place, but that would come under the bylaw, I believe, a little bit more. And wouldn't putting a policy in place be that first stepping stone to achieving the end goal of having an enforcement mechanism in place when we have an updated bylaw? And by putting it off, what is the plan that you're envisioning instead?
A question to Mr. Fazio. Did you want to answer that? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. So directed at Colleen, you know, all great points. And I think that what I'd like to see is our legal counsel come back with an actual enforcement policy. And like I said, I don't disagree with you that, you know, having a bylaw in place is the next step. However, we could see litigation come a lot sooner than that bylaw is changed. And so at this point in time, I'm not in favor of the policy as is, although I'm in favor of a policy. I'm in favor of this revenue coming into the town as soon as possible. I'm not comfortable with the approach we're taking tonight.
Mr. Optum? You're on mute. Mr.
Matt, you're
Optum.
on mute.
Has to happen in every Zoom meeting, doesn't it? I'm the victim. So I just wanted to respond to, you know, the commentary about us being good partners with local businesses. And I think the most effective way for us to be good partners is to be very clear on what our position is, because it's not clear right now. It's really ambiguous. So to me, the way to best partner, you know, and be business friendly is to make our position clear, to very, you know, clearly articulate what the process is. And I think that is represented in this policy. And what our expectations of the businesses are that are, you know, they're all investing now. We have more community agreements than we do positions for open RMEs. And so on what basis do they operate? So I think the sooner the better that we put a policy in place, which clearly articulates, you know, what they need to do and what the town's opinion is on what our bylaw is and what that means in practice. for these businesses so that they can carry out their business operations and make those investments and carry forth with things. I do think that the place for an enforcement mechanism would have been ideally in the bylaw. And I would love to move forward with getting an opinion from council on how we amend our bylaw to include that element in our bylaw and just bring that to Springtown meeting if that's possible at this point. So that would be my opinion. I'm in favor of this policy. I think, you know, the sooner that we can clarify this position, the better. And this isn't just about the businesses that currently have HCAs. It's because none of them have opened. They've all had HCAs for years now, and we have no revenue. So just our discussion of this has already prompted some action from businesses. So that's good, but it's not good enough. I think what most people voted for at that Springtown meeting when they voted for, you know, 2 licenses in town, 2 RMEs in town, were 2 open businesses. And I think we have to honor that. And this is, to me, the best way to do that.
Mr. Prisby, then Ms. DeFazio.
Yeah, just to add one thing, this policy in recreational marijuana aside, this is how I want to see this board operating. I want to see policies discussed in open session. I want to see policies voted on. I just found out that we almost had a de facto policy that was discussed between the former town administrator, council, and the former town planner without ever having brought it to conference room A and discussed amongst this board. That was completely inappropriate. And now here we are sort of worried about litigation, and because we hadn't done this 2 years ago, and we hadn't done it the right way. This is the right way to do this. Have the discussion in open session, put it in a meeting packet, be completely transparent about it so that everybody's on the same page. This is exactly how we should be doing this.
Ms. DeFazio?
Thank you. So I don't disagree with any of you and any of your comments. And so, you know, I want to refer back to Mr. Often's comments about business partnerships in the town. And you know, I've gone through that logic in my head too. And I have to agree with you that, you know, this clarification of policies is important. Unfortunately, we have been put in the position where the timing is too little too late for some of these operations in HCAs. And so, again, I mean, we're moving forward as one board, and you know, I am just not comfortable at where we're at. And the question of what would make me comfortable is putting an enforcement provision before, whether it's in the bylaw or the policy, before I was confident in voting on it. And that's not going to happen tonight, and that's fine. You know, that's just where I'm hung up, and I'm okay with moving ahead. And like I said, so I keep going back to this concern about this reputation with litigation. And if we, you know, companies that have spent money on opening or trying to open these HCAs, also the fact that there is a pandemic. And I know, you know, we can make up excuses about we're still continuing to do other buildings in town, but you know, there is a past there of things that are taking longer this year. So I leave this conversation not comfortable in voting in favor of the policy tonight.
All right, any other questions or comments? I just want to weigh in here. So we've had this in front of us now for almost a couple of months. We've had a workshop on this. We've had, you know, pretty in-depth discussion about this. You know, tonight, you know, we're talking about, you know, making changes, you know, to a bylaw that will happen in the future. And personally, you know, we already call the bylaw in order here in the policy. You know, in my opinion, let's say we don't have an enforcement provision that the town passes in the bylaw. Does that mean we don't go forward with a policy? I don't agree with that because, you know, again, because it hasn't happened yet. I don't think it should hold us up. I don't think the decision tonight should be dependent on, you know, what if the town should make a decision. I mean, what if the town were to make a decision this spring, to increase the limit of available RMEs within the town of Grafton from 2 to 3. Okay. So, all of those things are great ideas. These are things that we should be bringing forward to the town and we should have them consider. I do believe tonight, we've had this in front of us for a while, and that we've had multiple meetings and discussions about this. And I feel that it's appropriately written as a starting point, because what's to say we don't change some of the provisions of the policy if we feel that later on some of them aren't working out as intended. I mean, these policies should be living and breathing documents that us as a board review on a regular basis. Don't file and put away in a file cabinet, let it collect 2 inches of dust. These things should be something that we regularly review to make sure, are they effective? Are they still relevant, right? So I'm in favor of going forward with this tonight in front of the board and making a decision. I just want to appreciate everyone's time. Everyone's had input in this, every one of us. And I think that this does show that, from a collaborative approach, we've seen this from different points of view. I want to thank, Mr. Terenzini as well for the amount of time that he has spent on this. I mean, he's here on a temporary basis, and he's provided, I think, this board some really good guidance and consultation through this whole process. And I think that there's some more additional items that this board needs to consider in the future. And I look forward to us having those discussions. I've spoken enough. At this point, if there isn't any other questions, if we have one more chance. If not, I can entertain a motion at this point.
I move the board vote to adopt the first across the finish line policy dated January 12th, 2021 as presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded on the policy dated January 12th, 2021 as presented. Right, Colleen?
Yeah, that's what it says. I don't know if that's totally accurate. I'm just reading it, but I think it's pretty accurate.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I heard that right. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion on the policy adoption? All right, seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio,
DeFazio, nay.
Mr. Hoffman,
Often I.
Mr. Frisbee,
Aye.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, I.
Peter Carlson, aye. Okay, declare the motion carried. I do believe we should have in a future workshop item, discussion about, what a provision in the bylaw should look like. I think the board's in agreement that that's something we should be examining for spring. All right, thank you. Next up here, we have resignation in front of us, Ms. Christine Cooper. I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to accept the resignation of Christine Cooper as a full-time dispatcher and send her a letter of thanks for her service.
Motion made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio,
DeFazio, aye.
Mr. Hoffman,
Often I.
Mr. Frisbee,
Frisbee, aye.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, I.
Peter Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Thank you. Next up here, we have an appointment, but one of the board members brought up a slight snafu, and I want to give Ms. Roy just an opportunity to maybe address the board tonight on this.
Yeah, I'm not fully vetted on how to address it, other than I learned recently that apparently there's a list that special municipal employees, like election workers, for example, of committees that they're allowed to serve on. And CIPC is not on that list, but FinCom, for example, is. So tonight we have a candidate coming in who is looking to be appointed to both CIPC and an election worker, and then that would create some kind of a violation there. I know Ms. LaValle is aware of this, and I believe she's working with Mr. Terenzini on this, who might be able to provide more clarity on all that.
All right.
Other than to say that Ms. LaValle is aware of it, I believe it's been sent off to council for advice. The list does need to be amended. I really can't provide much guidance beyond that, Ms. Roy.
Can I suggest that we make the appointment to CIPC and hold off on the election worker? Because I know Mr. James has attended a few CIPC meetings. I know we'll be meeting again, and then hopefully by the time everything gets clarified, we can appoint him as an election worker later.
Mr. Fazio.
May I suggest also, Mr. Chair, that we could vote for both of them, and the second one provided that council approves that appointment?
I mean, the board can obviously make that provision. I guess it's the comfort of the board. I mean, Ms. Roy brought this to our attention late last week, and actually not late last week, it was a little bit earlier in the week, but I wanted to give an opportunity. I mean, again, we want to go ahead and just appoint on the CIPC. We'll get that out of the way, and then we can discuss how we want to handle the election worker. Does that make sense? Okay, I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to appoint Kyle James to the Capital Improvement Planning Committee for an indefinite term.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion of appointment? Seeing none. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio,
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Austin,
Often aye.
Mr. Frisbee,
Yeah.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, I.
Mr. Carlson, I declare the motion carried. So next up here on the election workers, so there was discussion here, just about having something reviewed. We could do one of two things. We could table this for a future meeting until we have some more direction, or if there's action that we need to take. Or to Ms. DeFazio's suggestion, and it depends on how the board feels, if it wants to just make the appointment condition on legal counsel's review and moving forward. But I would say the only question I have is if there is something that legal counsels, that we have to do, then the appointment would be held off until whatever action that we need to take, right? So what's the board wish to do? Ms. Roy?
We can kind of do it either way. My opinion is it's just cleaner and neater if we just table it and put it off until we have our solution. That way it's not one more thing you have to remember. Where is that ball? Who's in charge of that ball? And where do we drop it? Just table it, bring it back and clean.
All right. Any objections to that? Okay, we'll table that and we'll bring that to a future meeting. Thank you. All right. Moving up, we already did the appointment of Michael. And so action item tonight, I wanted to follow up from last meeting a couple weeks ago for 59 Pleasant Street for first right of refusal for under chapter 61A. I'm talking with Mr. Terenzini last week in preparation of the agenda. He would really like the board to consider a couple of action items tonight that either we exercise our first right and make an offer and go through that process. The second one would be to direct the TA to contact the seller and explore and describe donations of land will be affected if the town does not want to exercise first right of refusal. Or third, move to just waive our first right altogether. And the reason why we're bringing this back in front of us tonight is Mr. Terenzini really wants a motion from this board to direct staff to get this done because there is a timeline. It wasn't 30 days, it's 120 days from when we received the intent from the owner to sell to a buyer. And we just did we're waiting to get like the final date, Carter, but it was what? Mid-November when the office received that memo, and we've got at least another 5 or 6 weeks.
Yeah, let me, while you're discussing this, I'll look up the date. Joanne did send us that calculation mid-afternoon. So just bear with me one moment, please.
So is there any questions from the board while Mr. Terenzini looks that up? Mr. President?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, March 16th has been calculated as your drop dead date. As your board meeting, you technically have until March 20, 2021, but your last scheduled meeting is March 16.
Gotcha. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for that. Mr. Frisbee?
Yeah, so just to set the parameters of the discussion, I just want to be clear on our 3 options here. Turn the right of first refusal down, purchase the land, or sort of a hybrid approach, I suppose, is to direct Mr. Terenzini to enter into discussions about donating, if I'm getting this right, the rear portions of the lot that we're discussing that the seller had indicated they weren't interested in building, or at least the potential buyer had indicated they weren't interested in building on. Am I correct there?
That is correct.
Okay. Were we to purchase the parcel, where would this money be coming from? It's $650,000 at the last bid. I assume that if it comes out of 61A, I mean, having the right of first refusal means we get to match. They don't. So we're at $650,000 at least right now, right? Okay, so where would that money be coming from?
Mr. Terenzini, did you want to address, or Mr. Fazio?
I would defer to Ms. DeFazio.
Okay, so one option could be, let me just collect my thoughts for a minute, I'm sorry. So if, I'm sorry, I'm echoing a little bit too. I don't know if someone, Carter, if you'd mind muting, please, thank you. Just because I'm still feeling a little, a little headachy tonight, thank you, I appreciate it. So there's a potential if we wanted to exercise our right to purchase this property. We could approach CPC for some funding. I think there's also an opportunity because it's valuable land in the sense that the land trust and the state owns conservation land behind it. And so we could potentially qualify for Pell or other grants that could help us. There's also been in the past with the property with Hennessy where the town went through town meeting, and I'll get to that, and purchased the land from CPC, but then went ahead and sold a couple of lots and were able to recoup some of that funding to go back into CPC funds. And so my thoughts are that, we've heard that the property is valuable for people around that area. And we do have, Mr. Prisby brought up last week the housing crisis in Massachusetts, and I don't disagree with that. And I think that our town is handling that quite well and that we do have a lot of growth happening. But once a property is gone, it's gone. And that could really be a nice piece of property in an area of town that doesn't have any recreational areas. And if there was an opportunity to see if the seller would approve waiting until May town meeting, and that's a big if, could we bring this to town meeting with CPC funds, or even potentially do that and then sell just maybe 2 lots on the front of that property, keeping the back as we discussed earlier. And instead of building a whole 40B development, it kind of goes with the rest of Pleasant Street where there's just a house, a house, a house instead of another Peter's Way or something like that. So, for complete honesty, that is sort of the neighborhood, my area of town that I grew up in. I'm very familiar with it. And I just think that, again, land is valuable, and we've had a few people speak up about it. And that's the best solution I could come up with for what's our funding source if this was even a discussion and what we would do.
I was muted. Wow. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Prisby, we talked about some funding sources there. Is there anything else the board wish to ask? Mr. Often.
Yeah, I guess to me, the most valuable use for this land from the town's perspective is in the back part of the land. So that there isn't a lot of conservation value in a hayfield. The best part, as far as I can tell, is, for conservation is in the back part. It's to connect those other pieces. And I think for me, it's the wetlands and the wooded areas. It's not the hayfield that actually is going to provide the most value in terms of passive recreation in that area. So I think the town's interests lie in trying to preserve that as much as possible. And we have had some discussions with the developer about doing that at no cost. And for me, that's the most attractive option that we could pursue. I don't know that whether we have 2 or 7 houses in that 5-acre lot matters that much. If we can have a relatively simple process of the developer being able to build some homes. Also, if we're gonna sell 1 or 2 lots, they're not worth 650,000. So, frankly, I'm a little, I'm curious about how at 650 for the 5 acres or 6 acres that he's going to be able to make money on those, because that's pretty expensive per lot. So I think it's pretty expensive land for what it is. So I don't think it's in the town's best interest to acquire the whole thing. For me, I would rather see a no-cost option for us, thinking about keeping our tax base low. And even, CPC dollars, they're tax dollars. It's not sort of free money. And I don't think they have a lot of money either, based on what I heard at town meeting in the spring. So I think that's interesting. And I guess the other element to it is that we have so much chapter land that is going to be turned over from generation to generation over the next 20 years. We have to be really selective about our approach to which parcels we buy. And so I'm struggling with, is this the right thing to spend money on? Given everything that's going to come up over the next couple of decades. I don't know. It's a really interesting idea. So I guess those are my thoughts.
All right, Mr. Frisbee.
So the reason why this is a really interesting conversation is less to do about this hayfield than it is about, I think, direction of Grafton and identity here. I've lived in this neighborhood right down the street from this property for a decade. And that for sale sign has been out there every single day that I've lived here. I'll tell you that when I was on the Affordable Housing Trust back in 2012, that particular plot was a place I brought up. And I think at the time they wanted like 1.2 for it, which would have completely exhausted the Affordable Housing Trust funds. And even at 650 probably is not a good idea for the trust. I'm a little concerned about mission creep of CPC. And this doesn't have anything to do with our CPC per se, but under the statute, it was initially designed to preserve those parts of town that were unique and distinctive to the character and flavor of the community. Roney Bridge would have been a good example of that. Something that you wouldn't have saved otherwise because it didn't make any sense anymore, but you wouldn't have wanted to lose it either. And an open hayfield on Pleasant Street is not that thing. I'm sorry, it's just not. And I think it's convenient for people in the neighborhood to just want to keep that open space because they don't like traffic and they don't, want to look at houses across the street. But I would caution people, some of whom I'm looking at on this list right here, who live in my neighborhood and live in a house that is less than 20 years old. I don't know how you square that circle, because sure enough, back when our housing development, where I live, was being planned, there were voices saying, too much traffic on Pleasant Street, too much, we'll have to build another school. Okay. When the neighborhood from Blanchard got connected over to the neighborhood of Christopher, that's my house was one of the last houses built. And sure enough, people didn't want that connection to be made. Too much traffic going through the neighborhood. too many kids coming into schools. But here we are. My kids go to school here. Other people, my neighbors' kids go to school here, and we're all happy for it. In community after community after community, little decisions like this are made time and time again. And Massachusetts ends up being last in the nation in housing starts every single year, going back 20 years. So do you know why some people, when they bought into the neighborhood, bought their homes at $275,000 instead of $500,000, $600,000 now? It's because we stopped making houses. Because every single time someone moves into a desirable neighborhood, the first instinct that they have is to shut the door behind them. So no, I'm very much not interested in outlaying taxpayer money to make housing more affordable for people around the Commonwealth. We're not doing a good enough job in housing in this town or any other town in Massachusetts, to be perfectly honest with you, because every single time there's an opportunity to purchase public land and restrict the growth of housing, this is the conversation that happens. I have absolutely no doubt that if this board were the same composition it was 2 years ago, we'd have voted 4-1 to purchase this land, and then someday, open up an acre or two so that a developer could maybe put in a house there that they know they're never going to recoup any profit on, because nobody makes a profit on 1 or 2 houses. Okay, this is the same development from what's next to it. Peters something is right next to it. The same thing that happened right down the street, and I think it was Mitchell. I can't remember the names. You don't hear about these because the town never had an opportunity to bid on the land that opened up. But up and down Pleasant Street, this has already happened. And every single time when I was on the planning board, every single time people came in and said it was going to be the death of the neighborhood. There was going to be too much traffic to withstand. And every single time that was wrong. Every single time. So no, I'm very much not interested in spending money that we don't have. We're having a debate. It's ironic. We're having a debate about whether or not to raise trash bag fees or find $175,000 to cut out of a budget. That'll be someone's job, someone's teacher, a reduction of services. But we're going to find money now for this? Come on, no way. Absolutely not. And don't tell me it's not taxpayer money. It's CPC money. It comes from fees from taxpayers. Okay, it's taxpayer money. I'm not voting to authorize spending taxpayer money to reduce the production of housing for families like my own. I'm not, absolutely not. Carter, if you can negotiate with the seller to protect the back half where people are actually going to hike in parts of that lot that actually mean something, then fantastic. But that hayfield, absolutely not. It's an abuse. It's an abuse of a statute that was meant to actually protect things that were inherent to the character of the community. This is not that. That would be abusive.
Mr. Fazio?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I just may answer some of those comments. So where to start? So first of all, I personally, I'm not talking for, residents of this town, because I don't know what conversations you've had, but I've been in this town since 1978, and I still live in this town because I love it, and I love the growth that we've had in this community. And so I am not trying to stop housing being built in the town, and particularly in this property. What I'm trying to do is see all sides of an opportunity. And I do see it as an opportunity because I'm also someone who loves this community because of all the beautiful open space we have available. And so bringing forth a conversation of, instead of just having one opinion and moving forward with it, I try to provide another level of insight. And since we heard last week that the value of the property, and I'm not specifically talking about the monetary value of the property, but the value of the property for people who live walking distance to that area means enough to them that they have reached out to board members. So taking that, trying to be creative with, is there any other solutions? Is there a funding source? And my initial thought was, no, just like you. There's not, and like you, we're dealing with trash, we're dealing with this. There's absolutely no way, it's too bad. Or even, is this the right property? But with conversations with people on CPC who say, yeah, this is exactly the type of thing this funding would be for, And whether you, Ed, agree with it or not, or I agree with it or not, we are not members of CPC. So just bringing it forth and having them say, no, this is not a good idea for this money, or the townspeople voting and saying, no, this is a terrible idea to protect that land. It wouldn't be made in a bubble for this board. And, I understand. I mean, and that's our constant struggle with everything, right? It's like, we don't have the funds to do it. And so all I'm trying to do is perhaps bring together, bring forth an option that is creative. And if the answer is no, the answer is no. That's fine. And, you can feel how you feel about how we're doing with, housing development in town. And again, I just think that, in my opinion, there is a value, maybe not to a hayfield, which is why I'd be willing to take the model of Hennessy and perhaps build a few houses on that lot. I am not a land use expert, so I don't know the details of that for this meeting. But if we could get that money back, would that be a solution? And then that way we can have maybe a little more recreational space in the back, maybe perhaps, and I'm pipe dreaming here, but a baseball field where all the kids from Christopher Drive could go down and walk to. I don't know, but once the property is gone, it's gone. And so it's worth the discussion. It's worth bringing it forward. And it's not abuse to discuss it like this or to consider CPC funds for something like this.
All right. Mr. Upton and Ms. Roy.
I think Mrs. Roy was first.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Roy, please.
Thank you. Just to respond to Mr. Fazio, she said she spoke to members of CPC and that this is exactly what the funds would be used for. Did they indicate to you how much funds available they would have to be able to put towards this? Would they be able to cover the full 650? And if not, how much roughly would they have?
I did not get into that level of detail, Ms. Roy, because candidly, I wanted to bring the conversation forth to the board first, because I think it would be, like Mr. Often said, I don't know, and is there opportunity? There is opportunity for other grant opportunities, such as Pell and perhaps other state grants. Does the Grafton Land Trust have a little bit of money? Would we have a little money in the general fund? I don't know. I don't know what this plan looks like big picture. It's just, a starting point of oh, this would be an interesting conversation. What would this look like? And so, I would think if there was interest in this, that, we would ask Mr. Terenzini to speak to CPC about what fundings would be available. And also another big part of this would be asking the seller if he'd be willing to wait until town meeting too, because the answer to that could be no.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yeah, thanks. Mr. Fazio, again, I think your idea is interesting. I don't know if it's feasible or not. I would, as a kind of a first option, I'd be strongly in favor of moving forward with negotiations with the developer to see if we could work out some language where they gift us that back portion of the land. Because, to me, that's the most, if we think about even CPC money, I'm not bothered by CPC buying this land, but the reason that they would buy this land is for the back portion, not for that hayfield. The hayfield looks really nice driving by and it's, open space and all of that. But in terms of wildlife corridors and, the ecology of Grafton, having open space, passive recreation, people are not going to hang out in a hayfield. I've never seen any people actually in that field doing anything. I have seen people though in the trails around that property, right? Because there's a really nice trail network back there with wildlife and fisheries and the land trust. So Grafton owns some properties back there. I think our principal interest is in that back portion, and I wouldn't be opposed at all to buying that. But then we would need to unload that front portion. And it just seems like if we're buying this property for what is that distinctive characteristic? And then we're unloading it for a developer to come in and put some houses there. It would be a way better approach to just have the developer gift us the back part of the property. It just seems like such a cleaner way to go about it. That would be my first kind of option, and way better option than all of the mechanics of trying to wait for town meeting and patch together all of these different funding sources to then sell back part of it. And we've already kind of done this with another property over on Wheeler Road with this actual developer. So it feels to me like the best option for this board is to just move forward with negotiating that agreement to try to figure out if that's possible. If it's not, I'm open to some discussion about potentially acquiring this property, because there's a ton of value, I think, in having that back part of it. But only as kind of a second option to me. It's not how I would start.
Mr.
Chair,
Fazio, yeah, Mr. Fazio, right before, if you would, I've got Miss Anderson here, Director of Recreation. She's staff member. She had called me yesterday and wanted to, address the board. And I said, we'll see where this conversation's going, but if it's okay with you, do you mind if I yield the floor to her, or if the board's okay with that? Thank you. Miss Anderson, hi.
Hi, guys. Sorry, I missed the beginning of your conversation. So if this was discussed, I apologize. I just want to make sure that if we're considering just the back portion, that we're figuring out, where our access is to this land that makes sense for use of the property. So I won't go further than that if you've already been down that road. But I just, there was that easement question from last week, or it is great access for neighbors between Joy's Road or whatever is in there. But if we were to open it up more, does that easement, or where would be granted access, and that would still be in a useful way? Thank you.
Thank you. So what Miss Anderson's referring to, just so you know, she had called me yesterday and had a question, is doing a title search on this property regarding that. There's a 25-foot easement that looks like it appears on I don't know, the easterly side of the property, the northern part of the property, that connects Pleasant Street into the contiguous land in the back that would be accessed for, what Mr. Hoffman is referring to, some of the trails back there and that conservation land. That's all. Mr. Fazio, thank you.
thanks. Just very quick, I just wanted to comment on some of Matt's ideas. So I think what my idea stems from is sort of the protection, or lack of a better word, control of the developer not giving enough access or easement. And so I'm agreeable to his plan, as well as, kind of talking and negotiating and seeing what we can figure out here. Because to me, at the end of the day, whether it's 2 houses or 7 houses, that wasn't my point of bringing this up. My point was to, protect the land that is valuable. And so if we, my thought process sort of went to, well, if we can control the land, we can control what goes on there. But, to Mr. Often's point, my model is, could be a little messy and very risky. And at the end of the day, we could just end up, failing anyway at town meeting. So I'm okay with negotiating first with the developer and coming up with, it seems like the board also understands the value of the property in the back. And, if we can come up with a solution that way, we move forward. If not, we, have my plan as kind of a back burner plan. Do we then discuss going to CPC or not?
Okay. All right, any other questions or comments? Ms. Roy.
When the potential buyer was here last, he did mention that easement, and when he was talking about donating the back half, he also mentioned donating signage so that people knew this is how you would access that back half. It seems like he's really interested in working with the town to make all of it accessible and here's a sign.
Yeah, he did say that. All right, any other questions or comments? So there's direction here tonight that we want to give the TA and the staff about moving forward with this. At this point, what does the committee wish to do? I can entertain a motion.
So when I'm looking at this motion here, it says move to direct the town administrator to contact the seller and explore how to describe the donation, but wouldn't that be the buyer, contact the buyer, and can the town contact the buyer before?
So I think
Geraldini?
you're muted, Carter.
The reason we had put the seller in is because they're the ones who placed this before you. They would reach out immediately to the buyer, and then it would probably be a collaborative discussion. I just put the seller in because they're the ones who have the right of first refusal that you're dealing with.
Legally speaking, there's a property that's owned by a seller here. So ideally, if there were going to be a gift of land, it would come from the seller. We wouldn't wait till the title is transferred over to the buyer and then negotiate with them. You would think it would happen all in one closing.
Mr. Terenzini?
If I might, I think the way that this would really work, Mr. Frisbee, is a letter of intent from the buyer to make these various donations. And if some were to the town, you would then need an article at the annual town meeting authorizing you to accept those lands. And that letter of intent, whomever it was to be donated to, really is going to become a matter of good faith. The board would have to feel comfortable that there was a plan, that they were dealing with someone who was reputable, and then you're relying upon their goodwill to do it. I suspect that's the way this would evolve.
That makes sense. And that was part of my concern was, you know, we sort of like with the HCAs, there are people come into us and they make representations to us that a lot of times we're taking in good faith. And in this particular case, we'd be doing the same thing. Letters of intent are fantastic. And I think what makes us comfortable, or at least what makes me comfortable with this, is we've dealt with the same buyer before, as Matt alluded to. And they've got a reputation for being straight shooters and working in good faith with us. So that makes me a little bit more comfortable.
Any other questions or comments? The direction we want to give TA tonight? Or exercise our first right of refusal or waive it? What's the board's pleasure?
Well, Mr. Chair, I know I've only lived here 10 years, but if I may, if I can, I'd like to move that we direct Carter to reach out to the sellers and or buyers to try and negotiate a gifting of the rear walkable portions of the property to see if they'll gift those to the town.
Second.
Okay, got a motion made, seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio,
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Alton,
Off time.
Mr. Frisbee? Mr. Frisbee?
Frisbee, aye.
Thank you. Ms. Roy?
Roy, I.
To the cross line. Okay, clear the motion carried. All right, Carter, so you got your motion to go, and feel free to reach out and contact, come up with some options. All right. All right, next up here. So I wanted to add this to the meeting tonight. Town meeting's coming up, believe it or not. I know it seems like, you know, it's months away, and after today, you know, with the 1.5 feet of snow, you're like, you're nuts. But it is coming up, and I wanted the board to consider about moving the spring special and annual town meeting to outside on June 5th, 2021 at 11 a.m. And the purpose for this is Dr. Cummings reached out to me and asked if there was an interest in the board in wanting to share resources to be able to hold an event outdoors with audio, seating, and so on and so forth, and all the other amenities that go along with hosting these outdoors, and potentially saving the town, some money, and aligning our town meeting with graduation. So I told him I put this on here tonight to consider, and I just wanted to ask the board if it has any questions, or if it wants to go ahead and make a decision tonight or hold off. But he needs to know sooner rather than later, so he can plan. Ms. Roy.
I like the idea of an outdoor town meeting. It's been really fun.
Any other questions or comments? Ms. DeFazio, Mr. Alphen.
I think it's a great idea too. My only question to you, Mr. Chair, is will it affect our elections in any way?
So right now, our elections are slated to occur before June 5th. I haven't tackled that one yet. So good question. Mr. Frisbee or I'm sorry, Mr. Alphen.
Yeah, I like the idea of an outdoor town meeting. I think we're probably going to be faced with that anyways. So it's just a matter of when we do it. So if we can combine with the schools and save some money, I think it's a fantastic idea. My only trepidation, I guess, on that is that it puts the strong chief bylaw back a month or so. And so it puts that whole timeline back just a little bit. But really, that's my only concern with it.
So the strong chief charter amendment would be at the annual town election, right?
Yeah.
So it would only be a few weeks that would be delayed.
Yep.
Potentially. I'm sorry, I should say that. Mr. Frisbee.
Money saving synergy is always good in government. Anytime you can do it.
You don't get to say that often, do you?
Nope.
No. Ms. Roy, did you have another question? I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say that about the strong chief. You covered it.
Yep. All right. So at this point, does the board want to take a action item tonight?
I move the board vote the special and annual town meeting be held on June 5th, 2021 at 11 a.m. with the potential of a rain date on June 6th, 2021 at the Grafton High School football field and gymnasium.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? I will follow up with options with regards to annual town election. And I'll look that up and figure out if there is any action that we can take, but I will follow up. Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio,
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Alphen,
After I.
Mr. Frisbee,
Yeah.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, I.
Peter Carlson, I declare the motion carried. I apologize. There's a gentleman in the attendees who's still here, Edward Denaro, had his hand up, but I'm not sure at what part of the agenda. With the board's permission, can I permit him to speak? Thank you. Mr. Denaro, good evening. I apologize. Just seeing your hand come up, I wasn't quite sure if you had a question or if we passed on the agenda item, but I wanted to give you an opportunity.
Yeah, it was just back on 59 Pleasant. I was wondering how I have a document that I'd like to email to the members of the board. I did send it to Selectman Prisby already to his Hotmail address. So where can I send this document? It pertains to new laws that the governor signed, an act enabling partnerships for growth, but it involves zoning and change in zoning regulations. That's the first question. The second question is, does anyone on this board know if our town is considered an MBTA community because we do have a train station?
Mr. Denaro, when you mentioned an MBTA community, could you be a little bit more specific than that?
Yeah, you'll see in the document that the act imposes new multifamily zoning requirements that will impact nearly all communities within greater Boston, etc. But there's a discussion about towns that have train stations and changing of the zoning. So I wanted to send this out, this document to all the members.
Yeah.
But also for the zoning board, also to be aware of this. And from there, to see if these laws might make a change, and I realize you've already moved on, so I don't want to
That's
discuss it. I won't discuss it anymore, but the town has a right to buy this property. Once these laws go into effect, this may, other properties, it may be a different story.
All right, Mr.
So
Denaro, the
just
best
I
way
think
you
this
could,
information is vital. And if the zoning board and if the planning board is involved, there are obviously some critical boards when it comes to 40A, 40B, and 40R. And this new significant zoning changes affect those three areas. And I think the board should be aware of this. So should zoning and planning, if that's appropriate. And then if in the end it's decided, no, it's not in the town's best interest, to buy this property, or to come up as with a different plan as Selectman DeFazio.
Mr. Denaro, I want to answer your first question and who you can reach out to. If you would call the town offices tomorrow morning during normal business hours at 508, was it 839-5335, extension 1180. That'll get you in touch with the admin office.
Yep.
And they can coordinate you or where to forward all that information to, but we really appreciate it. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate it. Okay, next up on our agenda, we were talking about select board member and TA reports. Is any member from the select board have a report? Ms. Roy.
Open Space and Recreation Plan Committee met to finalize the revised action plan to be submitted to CMRPC. And CIPC met to finalize the 5-year capital plan recommendations and was submitted to the town administrator.
Any questions, comments? Mr. Frisbee.
I just have a report.
I'm sorry, Mr. Frisbee. What?
I just have a report, so when it's my turn.
Oh, okay. I thought you had a question for Ms. Roy. Go ahead if you're ready.
Sure. So speaking of housing, the Affordable Housing Trust is moving forward with potential development at 25 Worcester Street. But things are being slowed a little bit by, I think, the status of staff in the municipal center. Carter, I may need a call this week just to get things moving here. It's been several months with the planning office and just trying to get this thing rolling to get bids going out. So I'd like to make some substantial progress on this before I get off the board, and I'm no longer involved in this. Speaking of substantial progress, we are still trying to effort a time to get the subcommittee chairs of the GSC in here to do the benchmarking report. I was slowed down a little bit by an illness, and then we had other members of the committee slowed down by their own personal stuff. I would like to do that either next week or the week after. I want to coordinate with the members on what their availability is. Part of it is there's a school committee, obviously school committee meets on the same night, and one of our members is on school committee. So there's that, but then we should take up the charge because look, the GSC is going to be important going forward because, we just passed an override. The mistake that we made in 2014 is that we didn't conduct a critical examination of expenditures before a run up to the next override. In fact, we denied that there was an issue at all, and we should not do that anymore. So we should talk about, I think in the age of COVID, what reasonable expectations are and how we can how we can further those. The initial intent was to interview people and conduct what basically amounts to a citizen-led investigation about where your money goes, and put that in a way that people could understand who aren't, as Brooke Paget used to put it, inside baseball. And I think that's a laudable goal. It still is. But during this pandemic, it's goddamn near impossible. And, you know, we're having a hard enough time right now getting people into the municipal center who work there, to say nothing of people who don't. So we should take that up sometime soon.
Okay. Mr. Terenzini and then Mr. Fazio.
Just a comment to Mr. Prisby, if he could call me early tomorrow morning, I'll bring the matter up at the staff meeting.
Mr. Fazio?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I have an update. The Library Building Committee met last night, and I'm just reading through some notes here I'd like to share with the board. So the masonry on the outside, the brick and limestone, has been completed. In the existing limestone, if you happen to drive through the common, you'll notice the front of the building was also cleaned. It used to be a little black underneath the sconces, and that has been all cleaned up as well. So the first floor drywall is 95% complete. The second floor drywall is complete, and painting is 70% complete. The ceiling grid is 10% on the first floor. All the windows are in. Actually, I think there's an exception of one on the south side that's not in, but that might have even gone up today. So there's good progress going on with all the electrical and HVAC and fire protection. Cost and scheduling is all under control. There was one thing I'm trying to find here, but oh, here it is. The roofing remains behind on the project schedule, but it's not going to affect the overall critical path. So the date remains of June 8th, 2021, that the new library will open. So all really good news. There was also a subcommittee to talk about the furniture after our meeting too. So they're also discussing carpeting and tiles and the furniture in each room. So it's we're getting closer and closer to completion of this project.
Okay. Any questions? All right. I don't have any updates. Mr. Hoffman, do you have any updates? No? Okay. Real quick question. Ed, this is directed to the Grafton Sustainability Committee. Having a meeting kind of on an off Tuesday for this report, I've been willing to kind of figure out a date and time if that works better for you in the group. We were supposed to have this back, last month, and we moved things around. Is there a date or time? Because we've got our workshop for next Friday pretty much booked up, but now we're looking at March.
So, I mean, we're talking about presenting a benchmarking report. It really shouldn't take that much time. I think the coordination just needs to be, if I can coordinate with you and give us a slot in the meeting and let my members know when they need to be at this meeting, then maybe they would feel better about missing part of their other meeting. So I don't think we need to schedule a whole different time to come in, at least not for this particular portion.
Okay. All right. We'll work on that.
I'll talk with you offline about that.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have. Okay. TA reports. Mr. Terenzini?
Well, other than the weekly report that we gave you, particularly with the update on the cannabis operations, I am able to inform you today that the building department did issue the initial permit to begin interior demolition and work for MJ's Market. So that's progress on that front. The other thing that I wanted to let you know about is the town, we haven't received the formal letter yet, but has received a $300,000 grant for the sidewalk project. It's not everything we needed, but it is a start. And I think what's most important about it, Mr. Chairman, is, again, the process. Going through the goal setting process in September and clearly identifying for staff the priorities of this board and where it wanted staff to put resources yielded results. I think faster and greater than any of us had hoped. But I would urge the board to continue to annually set goals and set that direction for staff so that it knows where to put its energies in terms of trying to effect changes in the community that are important to this board as the chief policy setting body of the community.
Yeah. Any questions or comments from Mr. Terenzini? Mr. Frisbee?
No, I just totally agree. Thank you, Carter. It's a helpful process. You know, like any other time in life where you need to set goals, it's that process that can keep you moving forward and in the right direction. And God, if we could just get one sidewalk built, I would just feel so much better about my time on the board. Seriously.
I'm not sure we'll be able to get it built before your term is up, Mr. Frisbee, but I'm sure they'd be happy to invite you to the first pouring of concrete.
Just don't stick your hand in it when the concrete's wet, Steve. I don't think I could stand knowing that your handprint would be in there. That's all.
There'll be Ed's initials in the corner of the sidewalk.
It wouldn't be the first sidewalk either. I'm just going to say that.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Terenzini. Any other questions for Carter? I just want to say, I appreciate, the that event that we had back in the fall. I know we had it outdoors, and I thought it was a really good discussion with this board, how it helped prioritize, and we appreciate. I know I speak for myself, and I'm sure the rest of the board feels. We appreciate your structuring that conversation, keeping it concise, keeping it on time, on schedule, and holding us accountable on making decisions, so how to assist and prioritize with other town departments. So I know myself and this town should be very appreciative of that direction that you gave us. Thank you. All right. We had some correspondence come in with regards to 59 Pleasant Street. Does any of the board members have any questions or comments on that? No. All right, we don't have any discussion tonight, so we have meeting minutes for December 15, 2021.
I move the board vote to approve the December 15th, 2020 meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the meeting minutes. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Often?
Of tonight.
Mr. Frisbee?
Yeah.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, aye.
Peter Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Next up, we have meeting minutes for January 5th, 2021.
I move the board vote to approve the January 5th, 2021 meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? 1 second, please. Okay, thank you. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
DeFazio abstain due to absence.
Mr. Often?
Of tonight.
Mr. Frisbee?
Yeah.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, aye.
Peter Carlson, I declare the motion carried. All right. So that brings us to just some items. We have just some ongoing tasks that were brought up. Let me just pull that up. So we have, there we go. So we have a couple of workshops planned around some of the items. Does anyone have any questions going forward? Ms. Ford?
Yeah, what are the dates that we're meeting again? I caught a Friday in there. I don't know if I wrote that down.
A Friday? Oh, no, there's a Wednesday. There's a meeting for February 10th. That's public. I believe that's a presentation of the budget with the Finance Committee and the Select Board. That's a joint meeting. They should be receiving a invite from Ms. Fiacco on that anytime now.
Okay, but we don't have a workshop coming up on a Friday at all.
No, we have a workshop on the 9th. Now you've got curiosity is going to kill the cat here. Ms. White, where did you hear we had a workshop on Friday? Because now I'm like, uh-oh, what did we miss?
No, I thought you said that like 8 minutes ago. So I'm like, oh, I don't know what he's talking about.
Oh, if I said by Friday, I meant to say next Tuesday, we have a workshop. My bad. Yep. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Fazio.
I just thought I'd make mention because we were just bringing up goals meeting too. I didn't know if there was a workshop that maybe we could discuss where we are with our goals, what our plans are moving forward in the next few months, and just sort of a quick review. You know, it doesn't even have to take that long, but it might be something to add to a workshop in the next month or so.
I actually have that scheduled for our workshop on March 9th. Mr. Broussard will be here by that time for a good full 2 weeks. And that's going to be presented during that time.
Awesome.
Okay, but it is a great idea. I'm sorry I didn't share it with the board yet, but I figured that was part of the priorities of bringing on Mr. Broussard, that we have that discussion and review that document. All right, any other questions on here? So we have on the 9th, Mr. Terenzini will be ready for the online permitting.
Oh, we'll have a presentation on it, yes.
Great, okay. All right, and we're gonna be having a discussion regarding the fire department recommendations. Is there anything else on here that we feel that we need to add? If you guys can think of it, just let me know and I'll make sure we add it. All right, I think at that point, we have Mr. Terenzini's last department memo from the town. Mr. Often, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick one. Do we need to discuss sometime soon just our kind of public engagement strategy for COVID vaccine distribution? I think I'm seeing a lot from other towns. And I know, you know, we've had some internal communications around William, kind of taking on that mantle of helping us craft a strategy and whatnot. I'd like to be proactive about that. And I don't know whether we need to discuss it or we just need to ask staff for a kind of a plan for it. But it feels like we should be as proactive as possible about getting information out into the public and in as many ways as possible. So I guess, Carter, what do you think about that?
We can certainly, I think, brief you on Tuesday evening. The Board of Health is internally going through a number of decisions. It is challenging because the rules change quickly and the supply of vaccine is unreliable at this point. And delivery system could be very much diffused if in fact they're able to get this vaccine out to all the various pharmacies, Walgreens, Walmarts, CVS, and so forth. But I think we can put together a brief for you Tuesday night.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm seeing sign up sheets in other towns, use of emergency systems to advertise where distribution sites are gonna be and who's eligible and, it's, I'd just like to, I'd like to see what Grafton is, what the plans are, I guess, and how we're gonna get that information out.
There's a dramatic overpromising and under-delivering that are going on by many organizations, and we, quite frankly, Mr. Alphen, have been trying very hard to not fall into that trap, but yet communicate information. And we'll give you a full brief Tuesday night.
Thank you.
All right, great. All right, if there isn't any other questions, call his memo there in the packet. I can entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion made, seconded. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio,
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Alphen,
Austin, aye.
Mr. Bisbee,
Yeah.
Ms. Roy,
Roy, aye.
Bill Carlson, aye. Okay. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great evening. We will catch you next Tuesday.